So Kenneth White is the Senior Director of People Analytics and Strategy with the National Basketball Association. And the topic for his presentation is From Data to Decisions, Building Trust to Maximize Impact with People Analytics. And one of the things that we've talked about a lot on day one is the trust factor. One of the things I'm really excited about hearing from Kenneth, and you can go ahead and make your way up, is from data to decisions. When you think about the work that we do collectively in building a data consciousness within our organization, it has to lead to better informed decisions. And so without anything further, I'd like to introduce Kenneth White.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good morning. Only my second time in Toronto, but I already got a great story out of it. Apparently one of the tech guys kicked Drake out of his house when he was in high school, which was a pretty cool story that I'll definitely take back. Because in the US, we absolutely, love Drake, courtesy of Kendrick Lamar. But anyway, good morning. We all know the potential of people analytics, but it's also our prerogative to convince the business of it. It's been the demise of many a people analytics team or people reporting team, depending on your preference. Overall, all verticals of a modern business know the benefits of data-informed decision-making. Given that employees are critical to the overall success of a company, it makes sense that we combine that with technical savvy and concise know-how in order to push the business forward via its talent. One thing I've already made a mistake with is I forgot my clicker. So we're gonna move on to the next slide. But before I do that, let me just riff a little bit. My name is Kenneth White. I'm the Senior Director of People Analytics and Strategy at the NBA. I've had multiple experiences in data engineering, people analytics, and also overall consultative work streams with the business. And out of that comes one overall objective: how to push forward business outcomes with people analytics and HR strategy. People analytics, we generate so much valuable data, but we have a consistent issue with packaging it into a consistent and concise set of insights. Convincing business leaders of the need for people analytics starts with avoiding the consistent pitfall of data for data's sake, or in other words, an over-reliance on descriptive reporting. We're generating data, but are we truly driving change? Often, there's a disconnect between the insights we produce and the actions taken by the organization. This isn't just about a lack of trust. Overall, it's a crucial underlying factor in the success of people teams. It's about how we communicate, how we design our insights, how we align with business needs, and consistently create a stream of dialogue between our business leaders and our HR staff. And overall, how we overcome resistance. We'll address all of these, starting with how we make our data meaningful. Looking at this graphic over here, you can see through the text that leaders need not only concise insights, but a data-informed view of how to drive decision-making. Why? Because they don't want to have data for data's sake. They don't want you to put numbers in front of them and expect them to understand what you're saying. The key to showing the value of people analytics is having that dialogue with business leaders, is understanding what their pain points are, and then, of course, creating a concise 2 to 3 sentence max set of insights that identifies the pain point but also underlines a solution with an approach that they can take. Underscoring it, be aggressive, don't be timid. And that's one of the key ways that you can demonstrate your success. People analytics is consistently facing that question of what is the business relevance of the field? And in my experiences, including at the NBA, it's done through this. You need to build trust and drive change by focusing on a cadenced delivery of concise insights to business leaders. Now, some people maybe create massive frameworks, but it really comes down to a simple way of doing things. Each time you dive into HR data, think about what action can come from it. Don't just think about the numbers themselves. Think about how a business leader will view that data and then what they can take from it in order to drive the business forward. This roadmap provides a simple North Star framework. What we as people analytics leaders don't fully realize is that we hold an advantage over nearly every other HR COE because we are the single source of truth behind HR data, but we are also, and this is also one of the key underlining factors, silo breakers. We can see every single piece of talent data across the enterprise. What HR and business leaders have historically suffered from is a lack of someone who can weave together that spider web, so to speak, of HR data and then summarize it into a 2 to 3 sentence insight. Looking at this, it's a simple framework. Just talk with stakeholders about what their pain points are. Step 1, align with them. Number 2, gather the data, collect, but also govern the HR data because we all know how important data governance is. Gather that data and then generate those insights through concise, compelling narratives. And finally, act. That's going to be the driving factor across this presentation. How do we communicate findings and be an active part of the conversation after you deliver the data? Your job doesn't stop with the data. It continues. You speak with leaders. You speak with the business to understand what their pain points are and then how HR data can bridge the gap into driving better business outcomes. How do you do that? Insights are usually the weakness of many people reporting staff. When you look at universities, colleges, or any certificate programs, they always focus on generating those insights via Python, SQL, or something like that, but that's somewhat limiting. It also comes around, what you bring to the table, your experience, and identifying how you and your experiences can weave themselves into generating these insights. That is an advantage to build trust. And when you create those insights, and this is a key part, don't be sensationalist, okay? A lot of leaders, they just want neutral, third-party-esque insights. You are the arbiter of information, so to speak. You bring that neutral perspective that not only furthers business outcomes, but also gives them the ability to see you as someone who is not marked by corporate politics, who is not marked by some other factor that devalues the data that you delivered. In other words, you're not compromised. You are the arbiter. And when we talk about generating insights, it's also about how you present it. We all talk about data viz, but business leaders don't care about fancy charts, okay? In my experience, they just want it simple, direct. You know why? They've got 15 seconds to look at a slide, if they're in that mindset or an insight, and then take that and bring it back to the business. Don't spend too much time on the data viz. Just focus on what direct insight you can bring to the table. Second, be concise. Too much text is your enemy. Conciseness is your friend. Deliver the right visual, described in step 1, but also give that 1 to 2 sentence insight that is coupled with a piece of comparison data. In my experience, if you lack external benchmarks, which is an excellent external data source to compare to, use year-over-year progression. And if you don't have that year-over-year metric, handy, just say it's a baseline. And maybe infuse that with a little bit of anecdotal evidence that you might get from an HRBP. Because, number 3, that actionable recommendation is essentially the key part of everything you do. When you do that, don't do it alone. Look to the rest of your HR staff. Personally, our HRBPs are the first group I go to because what they have is a bunch of frontline knowledge that our data doesn't tell. When I look at time to fill, pass-through rates, our candidate funnel, for example, and talent acquisition, there are hidden stories inside of that data that I absolutely don't know about. Who knows about it? The people who are working with employees day in, day out, who understand the complexities of how that requisition may be very, very difficult to recruit for. So I go to them because they know what's going on the ground, but it also creates consensus. It creates an idea of what HR can do across its disparate COEs to, going back to it, break silos and deliver more actionable recommendations. So, generating the vizzes. Personally, my favorite is just having a single number, maybe surrounded by a donut chart. It's especially useful when you're going into proportions, for example. But again, don't get caught up in how beautiful your chart is. Focus on how powerful and concise, and that can be done in tandem, your insight is. And that personal favorite, highlighted in the middle of a donut chart, when turnover, headcount targets, or other pieces of data pop up, I find that leaders really love that the most because it really aligns with that whole 15-second philosophy. You know, when you look at a scatter plot or a line chart or a bar chart, those are all like great for particular use cases, but when you want to draw a leader to a single number, you can't bury it within any of the other charts. Focus on that single number, put it in front of their face, and then have them walk away with it. I draw on my experience actually as a former teacher in order to do that. Years ago, before I started in people analytics and joined the NBA, I was a math and special education teacher down in New Orleans, Louisiana. And one of the key parts of each lesson plan that I created, for my students, 4th and 5th grade, so kind of the best age, I would say, to teach, was 3 to 5 key points that they would draw from the lesson. The same lessons that I created for 4th and 5th graders now serve corporate leaders, at the NBA, for example, because they don't have much time and they need to walk away with key takeaways. And this one number approach very much works all the time. And it's about creating action, not just creating data for data's sake. However, bar, lines, scatter plot, other types of charts are useful. When it comes to bar charts, they're perfect for departmental comparisons. When I'm looking at turnover, and I use turnover and attrition interchangeably, the bar chart, definitely works. If I'm looking at like 30 different departments, I do a regular bar chart. Or I look at demographic groups, I do a sideways bar chart. Keeps it easy, keep it simple. You might be capable of so much more, but leaders, quite frankly, don't really care about that. They care about the insight that you give and how direct it can be. A line chart, excellent for, change over time, but then a scatter plot. That really dives into when you're going into talent management, for example. And I'm looking at performance ratings correlated with number of Coursera hours taken. And a president might want to know how effective our L&D program is. When I think about the L&D program, I think about, okay, what are these different data sources that can dive into it? And someone with more data literacy, like someone at that level, would definitely love a scatter plot. But it always comes down to the key question. What is the one key insight you want that busy leader with 15 seconds on the clock to remember? Overall, we sometimes in the beginning of the inception of a people analytics team struggle with how do we get our data in front of business leaders? When we talk about business leaders, we talk about HR leaders talking with business leaders as well. And oftentimes, you might create a meeting that might be, once every 2 weeks with an HRBP, but that's, disjointed. It's not really, a set narrative or a set, series of meetings that will produce change. I've often found across my experiences that a set cadence of a talent review is what brings you to the table most consistently. And this cadence talent review is the best way to do it. When I talked about my experience as a teacher, down in New Orleans, it aligns with producing an executive summary at the beginning of that cadence talent review. Those 3 to 5 key takeaways, those 3 to 5 key points that you want them to walk away with is how you start the presentation. Summarize it all. Don't dive into the massive amount of data. Just go to what they think is the most relevant. And before you even do that, how do you do that? You talk with the other HR COEs, such as HRBPs, about what the pain points are. Thus, when you deliver that executive summary of 3 to 5 key takeaways to business leaders who have never seen HR or talent data presented in that compelling a way, then boom, you not only have their trust, you have essentially their reliance, because they see you as someone who can deliver what hasn't been delivered before in a succinct, concise way. And then, you can dive into the fun stuff. And that always starts from a business leader with headcount and multi-year changes. You'll see the business, I put headcount versus budget target. But that's because I like, the rule of threes. So I put that down there. But it works for the business or headcount because they care about, okay, how many people do I have versus budget? Am I over that? And if I am, what do I do about it? And if I'm under it, let me go to one of these other slides like recruiting/talent acquisition to see what the problem is. However, title distribution is also extremely important. When we talk about succession planning, which is, I think, the number 2 or 3 topic that boards of directors think about, and number 1 when it comes to other HR leaders and business leaders at the president level and above, then that is what is at the top of their mind. And of course, demographics. But then after that, it's recruiting in order of importance. Time to fill is, of course, useful, but once they understand the overall time to fill, the next question is, what's holding up the role that I've been waiting to fill for so long? That's when we dive into the anecdotal experiences of recruiters, of HRBPs, of the hiring manager across funnel and pass-through rates. We answer those questions. Me, I've created an automated way of doing all of this. A lot of people may do it manually, and that's okay in the beginning, and I'll dive into it a little bit later. But what I've done is essentially create most of this, depending on the area of the business, within Tableau in an automated way with the partnership of IT, which we'll dive into in a second. And that way, an HRBP can just go in, click 2 buttons, download all of this as of a particular date with year-over-year comparisons or external benchmarks. And it saves me a bunch of time and essentially is a force multiplier because I don't need to consistently maintain any PowerPoint decks. It's an automated PowerPoint that they can download. After recruiting is hiring. When we talk about hiring, it's actually the weaving of external labor market data with the particular roles that each business is seeking. For example, right now, everyone talks about AI. Everyone talks about Gen AI. What roles in particular are we seeking to expand within each of these teams? And also, what does the external labor market dictate in terms of candidate availability? And of course, the business. When we talk about the business, it is all about how do we exhibit productivity, such as through multi-year revenue per employee, profitability, and are we sticking to our headcount versus budget like we talked about before? Given it time, I'll dive into it. But one thing that we often don't speak about is the IT side of things that undergirds this entire effort. IT is the unsung hero of people analytics, and it's not even close. With IT on your side, trust is never that far behind. The other part about IT is that they have a vested interest in the data being accurate and updated in or near real time, giving you a workplace ally that is second to none. Plus, IT folks are usually behind the scenes. So when you put some shine on the IT people, they're pretty grateful. And they definitely want to do more work for you because they never get in front of business leaders. So when you highlight IT folks, they definitely feel that and will return the positivity. All of these areas are important, but personally I find data integration and data governance and privacy to be the most important across all of this. AI, yes, is increasingly changing a lot of these, but you're going to see data governance and privacy, continue to be in demand in the broader labor market, but also increase in importance as expanding regulations and compliance activities, continue to grow at the end of the day. And beyond this, down here, automated Tableau reporting. I absolutely love Tableau. Automating all of those really is that force multiplier. I know people talk about Click or Power BI, but I just think Tableau, even though they don't update as much as they should, people are mostly familiar, it's still a really good tool, and it's the best vehicle with getting your insights out there in an automated way. But with IT, it's still about the data engineering. Without proper data engineering practices, which are increasingly automated, people analytics dashboards, for example, and the downloadable automated Tableau dashboards and PowerPoints that I discussed earlier may suffer from data quality issues, lack of timeliness, poor performance, and limited scalability, ultimately hindering your and their effectiveness in driving data-informed decision-making within your organization. And these are the three key tenets. We talk about data integration and data governance that I highlighted in the previous slide. Data integration, we all know, properly consolidate disparate data sources. Raise your hand if you've ever had to do a headcount distribution analysis and had no idea where to start. Okay, better people here than I thought, all right. But overall, that's the first part, integrate multiple data sources. And then data governance is the most important part. Maintain data integrity and ensure compliance with the expanding privacy and security regulations. And lastly, data modeling. This is where IT really brings the power to the table because they know exactly how to organize the data in a way that increases the speed and performance of the dashboards, but also any other insights that you generate. It's more technical, but you can't do it alone. IT is where you continue that conversation. Then, once you have all of that together, you still face the issue of adopting, or rather navigating, adoption challenges. The first area is data skepticism. Early on, each team encounters this challenge because it determines their success for years to come. It's natural for humans to be averse to the unfamiliar. People data is usually unfamiliar to clients, underlining the need to educate them about what you are building, and then second, how you are building it with a painstaking dedication to data quality. How do you surmount it? Number one, talk to stakeholders early. Talk with HRBPs, recruiters, about what these business leaders are facing and what keeps them up at night. Second, that helps build a coalition of support. And then when you deliver those insights and you have quick wins, celebrate them, make it memorable, but also emphasize the data quality and be transparent. And then not listed up here, talk about how IT contributed also, because they will always be an essential workplace ally. The second challenge is expectation misalignment. Oftentimes, people analytics is reactive to a problem happening. But here's what we don't get. We get to define the playing field. It is far worse to disappoint a client late in the process than it is to push back against their misaligned expectations in the beginning. So, how do you do that? You set clear, realistic goals at the beginning. You don't overpromise and underdeliver. If anything, you do the opposite. But you always communicate progress and challenges proactively so that they're never disappointed. These are the most common two issues with adoption challenges. And from what I hear, like here in Canada, it's a bit less mature than in the US. So these will be the two challenges that you face, no question, considering where you are in the stage of the process and which companies might be more advanced than others. So when you build these trusted partnerships, number one, early and frequent communication. Keep stakeholders informed. Data in its raw form can be overwhelming. Our job is to transform that data into a compelling narrative, a story, if you will, that resonates with our audience, makes our insights clear, and leads to action. This is about choosing the right visuals. It's about structuring our message effectively and using language that speaks to the business in a quick, clear, and coherent way. And for us, that might be a bit of a challenge because, we're data nerds, so we need to put ourselves in the heads of a business leader who has those 15 seconds. Understand their needs, listen to what they're saying and what HRBPs and recruiters are telling you, because that is how you can bring the data to bear in a way that generates action more and more each month. And of course, celebrate the wins together. Share ownership of the data. Your wins are their wins, and when you do that, you continue to drive people analytics forward. So, key takeaways. Number one, concise insights. When we talk about concise insights, summarize what you are bringing in a 1 to 2 sentence way. The actions you can take immediately to address those pain points, but also give that year-over-year or external data benchmark comparison in order to underline the importance of the data that you're presenting. We've talked about creating compelling stories, but it's also about aligning goals across HRBPs, recruiters, and IT. When you speak to business leaders, speak about business priorities and stakeholder needs. And from there, you can drive change. You can develop those strategies by being an active participant in the conversations that follow the data that you present. And by driving change, you earn yourself a seat at the table in a way that HR data, HRIS, people analytics, even HRBPs might not have before. And all of that is around building trust. That's how you really build trust. You maximize impact, and you give people analytics a seat at the table. What's not listed here too is, of course, the cadenced talent review. All of this can be driven off of that analytical product. So definitely don't forget that either. All right, so I think Donald just said cream in the coffee. So that's the part of Q&A. So any questions from this or any other ones? Go ahead.
Great presentation. Ian O'Keefe with Icona Analytics. We talked yesterday a lot about evolution of teams and evolution of programs. So your prez was very all-encompassing. Great presentation, by the way.
Thanks.
How long has the program been in place? Where did you start? What were some of the key learnings along the way to get to this very comprehensive viewpoint? Go for it.
When I started about 3 years ago at the NBA, for example, really wasn't a place to start. I mean, we had these multiple data warehouses, and well, let me just not go into the business critical stuff that I can't say in public, but overall, we didn't start at a compelling place. And so what we had to do was build the foundation, number one, but also speak with HR leaders about creating a bit of a bridge where we had 6 months to actually build some stuff out, for example. So we started there. There were no insights delivered to leaders. There were no cadenced insights in particular. There was really no way of going from these Excel-based analyses to these automated Tableau reports. And so over the course of 6 months to a year, that was built out into a self-service analytical platform that we have. And so now HRBPs, compensation, really anybody else within the enterprise who is given those express security permissions can access that in order to have that self-service level of reporting and analytics. And that cadence talent review that I talked about, it's able to be automated and downloaded as well, which reduces the work that I would have had to do, within classic tools like Excel, for example. So that's where we started, and that's where we are now. And one other piece that I would recommend for everybody is when you start, do a SWOT analysis, okay? Understand what you should prioritize and focus on. Don't try to boil the ocean. If you do that, you're going to fail because you're just going to turn around and be overwhelmed by a never-ending list of things to do. Prioritize, focus, build with IT partnership, and you've got a pretty clear recipe for success in a lot of ways. Thanks. I can hear you, so yeah.
Okay, so I'm Yannick Fouagou, Director of People Operations at Green Shield Canada. I love your presentation, but I want to start by saying that, it's a joke, by the way. Some of us in the room are we took offense when you say that Canada is less mature than the US, right?
My bad, okay. That's what I heard when I got the intro. Okay, I think I just weighed myself into overall politics, so oops. My intent was not to, push that button.
Right. So now my question. I love when you said, don't be sensational, don't be compromised.
Yeah.
Right. The flip side of that is, should we compromise? What I mean by that is sometimes the BPs or the business will reject the data because it doesn't tell the story that they want to tell, right? Or because it means they have to do some job that they don't want to do. So how do you handle that part? The data is correct, you know what needs to be done, but you reject it. How do you handle that? How do you not compromise, even if you are not compromised?
I mean, that really goes to the heart of delivering high quality data. When I talked earlier about being the arbiter, about not being seen as compromised by business leaders, that's really where it begins. You need to overcome that resistance to change because sometimes people don't like what the data says. And it is still your job to deliver what the data says. However, there is still also a balance and a compromise like what you talked about. It's not about delivering the worst of the data. It's also about delivering positive and negative data in the same way. When I do the executive summary, for example, with 3 to 5 key points, I focus on usually a distribution of like, oh, here are 3 great positive data insights, but then I do 2 negative ones, for that overall 5. Because you can't overwhelm somebody with negative news. Because everyone here knows, like some people won't like what you have to say. And so how do you manage that expectation? You start with being positive, and then you sprinkle in the negative news a bit also. So that's the sort of balance and, tripwire balance that you have to strike, and personally, how I do it. Yeah. Hopefully that addressed, the U.S.-Canada beef. Okay.
Hi, my name is Ajay. Just from an operational standpoint, right, like when we communicate to business leaders, one of the attempts we make, at least from the HR side of things, is like we try to give them one point of contact for everything, right? So that they don't have to think, okay, if I need this, where do I go? If I need that, where do I go? So just one avenue through which a conduit, right? Basically, then they span out. Usually the business partners, HR business partners play that role with some of the senior leaders.
Right.
So now when it comes to people analytics, right? Like, hey, we provided you this insight and all of that, and definitely that piques their curiosity, right? It's a different way of looking at their organization and their teams. Mm-hmm. Now, how do you then sustain that curiosity? Do the leaders work through the business partners, or do they come directly to the people analytics team? How does that work in general? So that's what.
Great question. Across my experiences, it's a bit of both. So it's number one, a reflection of company culture. Number one, around hierarchical structure. If you have that hierarchy and a president and an HRBP, that's the rigid relationship they have, then you're going to always go through the HRBP. But in other experiences, I talk with that business leader, I see them in the elevator, and I continue that conversation, and it becomes a conversation between the two of us. However, when there are more official communications and deliverables, I always make sure to keep that HRBP aware. I CC them. It's about relationship building. That stakeholder management aspect is what gives you the ability to navigate between those two worlds of HR and the business while breaking silos and merging them together. So it's a little bit of both, and it does require a bit of judgment on your part regarding the sensitivity of the HRBP to potentially being excluded, which is, I think, what you're getting at because you're smiling. But also, what the business leader prefers. And sometimes the business leader just wants to talk data with you. For example, if they're in a data team or IT or something like that. But if they just know, performance management or some of the more qualitative aspects of HR, they might prefer to go through the HRBP. So if I were to answer your question and give a recommendation, I would definitely say if there are more data-facing teams, be comfortable talking with the business leader. But with less data-facing teams, like marketing, for example, go with the HRBP. Yeah, sure.
Thanks for the presentation. I'm curious, I'm in fast-moving kind of consumer goods. And, the target sometimes changes. So I can appreciate that you want to present very clear, succinct, consistent data to your stakeholders. Have you ever faced an experience where, the data point is moving, the leaders are looking for insights, it changes consistently because of external factors given it's fast-moving consumer goods?
Yeah. I mean, consumer goods for sure. So in terms of, let's get the question right, the target is changing. Okay, so let's say there's what leaders want to see. Okay, well then that reduces the efficacy of an automated talent review, and it does require something more custom. With that, you will have to sort of just create the overall framework with overarching categories of what leaders might want to see. When it comes to consumer goods, I often think that they think about the bonuses, compensation of the salespeople, for example, within stores, if they have brick and mortar. And so when it comes to that, you'll at least have the umbrella categories ready within Tableau that you can build from. And thinking about it more, I think it's more about data field availability than it is about creating the structure. Like you'll have to be a whole lot more nimble in the consumer goods structure. And that means within Tableau, for example, working with IT to create an all-encompassing function with a ton of different data fields that might have worse performance, but still gives you the long list of data fields that you need to quickly, create an insight. And that part is where like the simple bar chart, line chart, or simple numbers come into play, and reducing a reliance upon fancy charts. So having that big all-encompassing Tableau function ready to go, coupled with under reliance on fancy charts and just direct numbers, gives you that flexibility to deliver insights in whatever sphere the business leader wants that day, for example. Yeah. Great.
Fantastic. Kenneth, thank you so much. Give him a hand. Wonderful presentation.
Thanks, Bob.
That was great. That was really good.